Hey everyone, it's time for a segment I like to do periodically, which I entitle, What Would Have to Be True in Order for Me to Be Wrong About Bitcoin? So as you can imagine, I ask myself this question frequently because I have 96% of my liquid net worth in Bitcoin. And so, I'm super fixated on making sure I'm not wrong, and therefore something bad does not happen to 96% of my liquid net worth. Okay, so let's walk through the scenarios of what would have to happen in order for Bitcoin not to become the new monetary system of the world. Okay, so scenario one. Number one is that the people in the Federal Reserve and the government suddenly become super responsible and omniscient, omnipresent, all the omnis. And first of all, they figure out how to know perfectly what interest rates ought to be, which is actually unknowable because it's just like knowing the optimal price for a tank of gas or a pencil or a lawnmower. There's absolutely no way to know that without just supply and demand. So for the first thing is the people that control the money supply would have to know with absolute perfect knowledge what the interest rate ought to be and not print any money, that would mess that up. And second, they would have to restrain every urge they had, even though they have the ability to magically print unlimited amounts of money. They would have to not ever do that again, not for wars, not for recessions, not for panics, not for global pandemics, not for anything. They would just have to never print more money ever again. So because humanity, we've never found these perfect angels that never run the money printer even though they can, and because every fiat currency that's ever existed, except the ones that were invented recently, have all eventually crashed and hyperinflated away, the probability that humanity is suddenly going to get perfect knowledge about interest rates and the discipline to implement that perfectly, that probability I'm going to put at a big fat zero. Zero chance that humanity is going to stop sinning, stop responding to incentives, stop succumbing to pressures, and magically become super responsible for the rest of our lives, and therefore the US dollar is great and we don't need an alternative. So that scenario I'm putting at zero. Okay, another scenario. We don't use money as a technology at all anymore, and we go back to barter, swapping shoes for cows and clothing and all that sort of stuff. Again, I'm going to put that probability at zero. Okay, so scenario number three. What if a different, better cryptocurrency comes along? That's not going to happen for a bunch of reasons. One, there was really only one shot to invent the perfect cryptocurrency, because you really, in order to create the perfect cryptocurrency, you had to have the creator disappear so that the focus could be on the currency and not the creator. And in the modern era, it's impossible to create a cryptocurrency without anybody knowing who you are. That was possible exactly once, because it was Bitcoin, because it was the first time, and because the only people who were even interacting with Satoshi Nakamoto back in the day were people that, part of the cypherpunk movement and the sort of people that are, you could just get away with being anonymous. So that will never happen again. Also, Bitcoin has the vast majority of the hash power, which is what secures and audits the Bitcoin network. And every good idea that is invented for some other cryptocurrency, if it's a good idea, could be adopted into Bitcoin by the Bitcoin core developers. And 20,000 people, 20,000 cryptocurrencies have attempted in some way to improve upon Bitcoin, and none of them have been successful. Bitcoin is the dominant 800-pound gorilla, and the only blockchains that have gotten any traction are ones like Ethereum, which are not even trying to be cryptocurrencies and are by definition not cryptocurrencies. They are smart contract platforms, meaning they're not even trying to be money and they're not intended to be used as money. Give me 1 second. Okay, so to recap, people are not going to suddenly be responsible that are in government and have power and have the magic money printer. They're not going to suddenly be responsible. We're not going back to barter. And no other cryptocurrency is going to replace Bitcoin. And if you want more information on that, read the Fidelity report entitled Bitcoin First Revisited. That name again is Bitcoin First Revisited. And it goes through all the reasons that it's extremely unlikely that any other cryptocurrency would ever take the mantle from Bitcoin. It's effectively the probability zero. And one of the reasons for that is everything you could possibly do to improve Bitcoin introduces some downside. So back in 2023 and 2024, I went to Satoshi Roundtable in Dubai. And back in 2023, I brought a list of about 26 things that I wanted to better understand about Bitcoin. And probably 20 of them were, why didn't Satoshi do this? Why didn't Satoshi do that to improve Bitcoin? And after sitting down with Adam Back and Charlie Lee and, Pete Rizzo and a bunch of people that were actually there back at the very, very, very early days of Bitcoin, you find out that there's all of the ideas that people like me could come up with for ways that we think we can improve Bitcoin. It turns out they make Bitcoin worse in some way. It's much more worse in some way than it is better by adopting that feature. So it's just amazing. Bitcoin is in this very, very, very narrow design space where everything is optimized. And if you change anything, it gets worse. And obviously all 20,000 cryptocurrencies that have come on the scene and attempted to compete with Bitcoin have to change something. And inevitably they change something that makes it worse. And even if they somehow came up with something better, well, Bitcoin would adopt whatever it is that's better. So that is, to recap once again, we're not going back to barter. The fiat system is never going to work because humans are never going to know the perfect interest rate and implement the perfect interest rate. That's never going to happen as long as humans are sinful and they are not all-knowing. And no other cryptocurrency is going to replace Bitcoin. Okay, so that leaves the last one that I can immediately think of, which is, what if we go back to the gold standard? Well, we're definitely not going back to the gold standard for a couple of reasons. One, we already went onto the gold standard once in the U.S. History. And the U.S. government took us off of the gold standard. So if we ever end up on the gold standard again, the government will take us right back off of the gold standard as soon as there's any sort of controversy or war or pandemic or recession, basically anything that involves the need to print money. They will take us off the gold standard, print a bunch of money, and then revalue the gold just like they did before. So the original gold standard, when gold was $20.67 an ounce, and the U.S. government in 1933 took the U.S. off that gold standard and confiscated everyone's gold, which is something that can't happen with Bitcoin because of self-custody and a bunch of other reasons. But because the U.S. Constitution mentioned the word gold in it, and because the federal government controlled the money system that was tied to gold, they felt like they could issue Executive Order 6102, and demand that the entire U.S. population turn in their gold for $20.67. And as soon as they took everyone's gold away, they revalued gold at $35 an ounce, which basically they printed a ton of money. That's what happens when you do that. You print a ton of money, and obviously it drives the price of gold up. And then obviously gold did not even stay pegged to $35 an ounce because they printed a ton of money, and gold ultimately has now gone up to $2,500 an ounce. So gold was supposed to be $20.67 an ounce. Then the government took everyone's gold away and revalued gold at $35 an ounce. And then, because nobody had any gold, by the time they gave everyone the right to own gold back in 1976, I think it was in the mid-1970s, gold had crept up to much higher prices, and now gold is $2,500 an ounce. But we are not going back to the gold standard for a bunch of reasons. One, gold does not work well as money. There's a bunch of flaws to its monetary properties. It's not sufficiently divisible. It's not authenticatable. It's really hard to know if what you have is gold. So if somebody was buying something really expensive from me, I would never accept gold coins because I don't know that they're gold. I don't know that they're not tungsten inside. And obviously I don't want to have to melt them down to figure out if it's actually real gold. Also, gold has the huge problem of it has to be stored somewhere. So if you don't give me physical gold, which again has problems with divisibility, it has problems with authenticatability. If you don't give me physical gold, then it has to be stored somewhere, and I get what's called a warehouse receipt, which is to say, I'm transferring, an ounce of gold in Switzerland to you, Joel. Well, I don't know that the gold in Switzerland is actually there, and there's no good way for me to know that. Or to know that 5 or 10 or 20 different people all think they don't own the same ounce of gold in Switzerland. So for a bunch of reasons, there is zero chance we are going back to the gold standard. We've been there. We came off it. We're not going back. If we ever did go back, we'll come off it again. If the BRICS nation go on a gold standard, they will come off the gold standard eventually. As soon as they build up people's trust in the currency sufficiently, they will overprint money, and then they will come back off the gold standard. And even if the government of the United States never confiscates everyone's gold again, like they did with Executive Order 6102, they can. And they did it once. And the best way to predict whether a government's going to do something ever again is to ask yourself, have they already done it once? And the answer is yes, they did it once. Well, the probability they're going to do it again is super high because they've already done it once. And they could use the exact same justification. So Bitcoin is effectively unconfiscatable. And it's much more distributed than gold because you can self-custody with things like BitKey. And so there's really no good way for the government to take Bitcoin. There is easy ways for government to take gold. There's not good ways for them to take Bitcoin due to self-custody and the way Bitcoin works. And then last up, what if the government ever bans Bitcoin and therefore forces the use of fiat currency? That's not going to happen after the ETFs were approved. Now Bitcoin is in retirement accounts of tens of millions of people in the United States. So that would wipe out chunks of their retirement accounts. Plus, Bitcoin's not mentioned in the U.S. Constitution, so there's no grounds for seizing it like they claimed there were back with Executive Order 6102. Again, Bitcoin is super distributed. There's just no way in the current political reality. And in addition, the courts are very friendly to Bitcoin because you can hold Bitcoin by literally memorizing 12 words in your head. And there's no way to ban, memorizing words in your head. Similar to the way cryptography, when the government originally tried to ban cryptography back in the 1990s, people actually printed T-shirts with cryptography on them. And the argument was you can't ban it because it's now free speech because I'm wearing a T-shirt that shows, the cryptographic codes that are required to encrypt communication. And so what are you going to do? Ban my T-shirt? So Bitcoin works the same way. There's just no way courts in the United States would ever uphold any sort of Bitcoin ban. So as I think through, in summary, once again, as I think through everything that could possibly go wrong and everything that could come to be in order for my thesis that Bitcoin will be the future monetary of the system of the world to not be true, I just can't come up with any reason that has any material non-zero probability of coming true where Bitcoin does not become the future monetary system of the world. And if it does, you're looking at a price per Bitcoin above $1 million per coin. And so, again, as I've laid out these scenarios, I just don't see any of those scenarios coming to reality. There's just no way. And that's coming from 11 years of building a business, 8 years in the House of Representatives as a state legislature, understanding how governments think, how they work, more than a decade now of studying monetary policy, how political systems work, the incentives of political systems, being involved in the starting of Prospera, the newest political system in the world. You just add all that together and I'm like, I just don't see any way that Bitcoin doesn't win. Now, is it going to be up and down on the way there? Sure. We'll get price corrections and that will continue to be the case. And the longer time goes on, the lower those price corrections will be, the more stable it will be. And eventually, Bitcoin will be the most stable asset in the world. And until then, it's a fantastic investment. After it's the future monetary system of the world, it will go up in purchasing power probably 2 to 3% a year, which reflects human productivity growth. But until then, you can benefit from a massive investment upside of Bitcoin. And the downsides are just so limited, in my opinion, because the likely outcomes that would result in Bitcoin not becoming the future political or monetary system of the world, the likelihood of the things that could go wrong to Bitcoin is just smaller than any other major asset. Like I can envision a million things that could go wrong with Amazon or Tesla or Google or Facebook or Nvidia or Apple or Coca-Cola or, Berkshire Hathaway. I can envision hundreds of things that could go wrong with any of those companies. The founder gets killed in a plane crash. The product gets obsoleted by some new technology. Just all of the things that could go wrong that would never involve me ever putting 96% of my liquid net worth in a company or a stock or anything like that. Those things just don't apply in the case of Bitcoin. And which is why I have 96% of my liquid net worth in Bitcoin, because I just feel like all the bad things that could happen to stocks and bonds and commodities and real estate, they just don't apply to Bitcoin. And the things that do apply to Bitcoin have such an infinitesimally small probability of coming to fruition that it just doesn't, I just feel very confident with, the vast majority of my liquid net worth in Bitcoin. So, if I have forgotten or did not mention something you've thought of that could be something that could play out that involves Bitcoin not being the future monetary system of the world, please let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts on what it is, if you can think of anything, and if leave it in the chat here, or put it in or text me at 601-207-0813. That number again, 601-207-0813. Anyway, if you got any ideas I haven't thought of, please let me know. Also, scam accounts continue to happen on Facebook, so be on the lookout. I will typically never message you on Facebook Messenger. If you get messaged by someone, it's almost certainly a scam. I don't have any sort of trading. I'm never going to ask you to send Bitcoin somewhere. Anyway, anybody who reaches out to you and claims to be me is almost certainly a fake account. But you can always text me to ask, or you can, it's pretty obviously fake. They always blur my picture out. The person has it's just a fake account. It was created yesterday. There's just lots of fake accounts that pretend to be me on Facebook. So don't get scammed. But anyway, have any questions, let me know. I'm always here to serve. Thank you, everyone. Much appreciated. Enjoy your Bitcoin journey.